She dared to do the unthinkable, to shatter the gilded cage of American aristocracy with a single, audacious act. In an era defined by rigid social codes, where a woman's reputation was her most precious and often only currency, she initiated a seismic shift that sent shockwaves through the very foundations of high society. Her decision wasn't just personal. It was a public declaration of independence, a challenge to the patriarchal norms that governed the lives of even the wealthiest women. It was a scandal of unprecedented scale, a drama played out on the grandest stages of Newport and New York, involving fortunes beyond imagining and a social circle obsessed with appearances. The whispers began in the drawing rooms of Fifth Avenue mansions and echoed through the ballrooms of Newport cottages. How could she? What would become of her? The stakes were astronomically high, not just for her own future, but for the very fabric of the Gilded Age elite. This is the story of Alva Vanderbilt, the woman who, with a $10 million settlement, engineered the divorce that rocked the Gilded Age, challenging its conventions and forging a path of her own. Born Alva Erskine Smith in Mobile, Alabama in 1853, her early life was marked by a genteel Southern upbringing, but also by the economic instability that followed the Civil War. Her family, though once prominent, found their fortunes diminished. The war had stripped away their plantations and much of their inherited wealth, leaving them with little more than their name and a fading memory of prosperity. The Smiths briefly settled in Madison Square, New York City, before later spending time in Europe, notably Paris, where the young Alva attended a rigorous boarding school, gaining a cosmopolitan polish that would serve her well. After the Civil War, with their circumstances significantly reduced, the family returned to New York City, where Alva and her mother were compelled to run a boarding house, a stark contrast to their former life of leisure. This period of necessity further honed Alva's sharp intellect and iron will, instilling in her a fierce determination and a pragmatic understanding of the importance of financial security and social standing. She witnessed firsthand how quickly fortunes could be lost and how precarious social position could be without a solid economic foundation. At age 21, Alva caught her lucky break. It was through her close friend Consuelo Yiznaga, a vibrant and well-connected Cuban-American socialite who would later become the Duchess of Manchester, that Alva was introduced to William Kissam Vanderbilt. Consuelo, acting as a shrewd matchmaker in the bustling social scene of New York City, a city brimming with both old fortunes and new, facilitated the meeting at a party in June 1874 between her ambitious friend and the grandson of the Commodore. William, a man of immense wealth but lacking the social finesse and ambition that Alva possessed in spades, presented an opportunity for a strategic alliance that would benefit both parties. Alva brought to the table a strong, capable partner who could navigate the treacherous waters of high society, someone who could elevate the Vanderbilt standing. He, in turn, was her entry ticket to unimaginable wealth and the platform from which she would launch her audacious assault on the social establishment, a stage set for her grand ambitions. They married 10 months later on April 20, 1875, marking the union of immense wealth with Southern lineage and ambition. Life as William Vanderbilt's wife was a dazzling yet demanding existence. It was a world of immense privilege but also rigid expectations. Alva understood that mere wealth was not enough. It had to be displayed, celebrated, and leveraged to gain social ascendancy. William had the money and Alva had the vision and the strategic mind to transform that money into social power. Her first major salvo was the construction of the magnificent Vanderbilt mansion at 660 Fifth Avenue, a French Renaissance chateau designed by the celebrated architect Richard Morris Hunt. This wasn't just a home, it was a fortress of ambition, a dazzling statement of wealth and taste intended to overwhelm and impress the old guard. Every detail, from the imported French tapestries to the marble staircases, was meticulously chosen to convey an air of established aristocracy. Despite the family's relatively recent ascent, it was a challenge to the understated elegance of the old guard, a declaration that the Vanderbilts were not just rich, but culturally sophisticated. But the true masterpiece of her social engineering came in 1883 with the legendary fancy dress ball held to celebrate the mansion's completion. It went like this. Mrs. Astor, the undisputed queen of New York society, had pointedly excluded the Vanderbilts from her inner circle, refusing to acknowledge their social legitimacy. Alva, with calculated precision, announced that no one would be admitted to her ball unless they had left a calling card at her home, a subtle but undeniable demand for formal recognition. The ball was to be the most extravagant event of the season, with over 1,000 guests invited, each expected to arrive in elaborate, historically accurate costumes. When Mrs. Astor's youngest daughter, Caroline, a.k.a. Carrie, expressed her desperate desire to attend, Mrs. Astor was faced with an agonizing choice: maintain her rigid social barrier and allow her daughter to miss the most talked-about event of the season, or admit defeat. In a moment that became legendary, Mrs. Astor made the humiliating pilgrimage to the Vanderbilt mansion, leaving her card and in so doing acknowledging the Vanderbilts' entry into the highest echelons of society. It was a triumph, a moment that cemented Alva's reputation as a social strategist par excellence, a woman who had, through sheer will and strategic brilliance, breached the impenetrable walls of old money. For years, Alva relished the status of a perfect Gilded Age marriage, presiding over lavish entertainments, constructing grand summer cottages in Newport like Marble House, another Richard Morris Hunt masterpiece, a true palace of white marble designed to outshine all others, and raising her 3 children, Consuelo, William Kissam Jr., and Harold Sterling. Her days were a whirlwind of social obligations, hosting elaborate dinners, attending exclusive parties, overseeing the vast household staff, and meticulously planning every detail of her family's public image. She was the architect of their social ascent, a formidable figure who commanded respect if not always affection. She was known for her sharp tongue and her unwavering determination, qualities that made her both admired and feared. Yet beneath the glittering surface of balls and opulent mansions, cracks began to appear. William, though initially captivated by Alva's ambition and drive, was a man of simpler tastes, often preferring the company of horses and yachts to the intricate social machinations that consumed his wife. He was a sportsman, a bon vivant, and increasingly a man who sought solace and excitement outside the confines of his marriage. His affairs became an open secret within their circle, a source of quiet humiliation for Alva, who valued control and dignity above all else. The societal double standard was glaring. While William's indiscretions were largely overlooked or discreetly tolerated by his male peers, Alva was expected to maintain a flawless public image, to turn a blind eye to his philandering for the sake of appearances. This hypocrisy fueled her growing resentment and her desire for true autonomy, a desire that would soon collide head-on with the unforgiving societal norms of her era. The Gilded Age was a time of strict moral codes, especially for women. Divorce was a scandalous rarity, almost unheard of among the elite. A divorced woman was often ostracized, her reputation irrevocably tarnished, her social standing destroyed. She would be excluded from social gatherings, her name whispered about in hushed tones, effectively banished from the very society she had worked so tirelessly to conquer. For a woman of Alva's standing, initiating a divorce was an act of social suicide, a move that few dared to contemplate, let alone execute. Yet, Alva was not one to suffer in silence or to accept her fate. She was a woman ahead of her time, possessing a fierce independence and a growing awareness of the limitations placed upon women, even those of immense wealth. The specific catalyst for her decision was William's flagrant affair with a woman named Anne Harriman Sands Rutherford, who, by the way, was destined to be his second wife. Their liaison became so widely known and publicly disrespectful that it served as a direct and undeniable affront to Alva's dignity. This was the ultimate insult, a public affront that Alva, with her pride and strategic mind, could not tolerate. Undeterred by scandal or the threat of social exile, Alva's unyielding resolve propelled her forward. She saw an opportunity not just to escape a failing marriage, but to redefine her own agency, to assert her will in a way no woman of her stature had before. The how of the divorce was as calculated and dramatic as her social climbing. Alva, ever the strategist, was not about to walk away. She leveraged her power and her knowledge of William's transgressions. In March 1895, she filed for divorce on the grounds of adultery. The scandal exploded in the press, ever hungry for stories of the ultra-rich. Every detail was devoured, printing sensational headlines about the impending split of one of America's wealthiest couples. Society was aghast. No Vanderbilt had ever divorced, and certainly not in such a public and sensational manner. The legal proceedings, though swift and relatively quiet due to William's desire to avoid further public humiliation, were a sensation. Alva's meticulous planning ensured that the evidence of William's infidelity was undeniable, leaving him little room to contest the charges. The settlement was staggering: $10 million in cash, a sum equivalent to hundreds of millions today, plus custody of all 3 children. This outcome was highly unusual for the era, especially among the American elite, where fathers typically retained legal control over children following a divorce. Alva's success in retaining custody of Consuelo, who was 18 at the time, William II at 16, and the 11-year-old Harold not only protected her children's futures, but also preserved her own social standing and influence. It also allowed her to remain a central figure in their lives and to orchestrate a strategic move that would later come in very handy to Alva, which I'll get to very shortly. For now, let's just say that the reaction from Gilded Age society was immediate and overwhelmingly negative. The old guard, who had grudgingly accepted Alva into their ranks after her social triumphs, now saw her as a pariah. Divorce was seen as a moral failing, a stain on the family name that threatened the very foundations of their carefully constructed world. Women in particular were expected to endure infidelity in silence, to maintain the illusion of a happy marriage for the sake of appearances and social standing, no matter how miserable their private lives might be. Alva, by breaking this unspoken rule, by daring to challenge the patriarchal control over women's lives, was seen as a dangerous precedent, a threat to the established order. She was initially shunned, excluded from social events, and whispered about in hushed tones. Her name became synonymous with scandal, a cautionary tale for any woman who dared to defy convention. Yet Alva, with her characteristic resilience, refused to be defeated. She understood that while society might condemn her, it could not ignore her, especially not with her vast wealth and continued influence. She knew that money, combined with strategic action, could open doors that conventional morality sought to close. Her reacceptance into society was not a passive process. It was another master stroke of strategic maneuvering, perhaps her most audacious. The key lay in her eldest daughter, Consuelo. Consuelo Vanderbilt was a stunning beauty, and more importantly, she was an heiress to an illustrious fortune. Alva, recognizing the immense power of a strategic marriage, set her sights on the British aristocracy, specifically a ducal title. Despite Consuelo's deep love for an American named Winthrop Rutherford, Alva ruthlessly engineered a marriage between Consuelo and Charles Spencer Churchill, the 9th Duke of Marlborough, in 1895, just months after her own divorce. It was a notorious dollar princess marriage, a common phenomenon of the era where American wealth rescued impoverished European nobility, but none were as publicized or as controversial as Consuelo's. The Duke, in desperate need of funds to restore his ancestral Blenheim Palace, married Consuelo for her dowry of $2.5 million, a sum that was technically Alva's gift to her daughter, a portion of her divorce settlement. Alva famously locked Consuelo in her room and threatened to shoot Rutherford if she refused to marry the Duke. The marriage, though deeply unhappy for Consuelo, was a resounding social success for Alva. By marrying her daughter into one of England's most prestigious ducal families, Alva not only secured Consuelo's future, but also elevated her own social standing to an international level. It was impossible for American society to continue to ostracize a woman whose daughter was a duchess and whose family was now intertwined with the British aristocracy. The doors that had slammed shut began to creak open once more, and Alva, ever the social arbiter, walked through them with her head held high. Alva's life post-divorce was far from quiet. In 1903, she married Oliver Hazard Perry Belmont, a wealthy socialite and former husband of her close friend Sarah Cooper Hewitt. This second marriage, though less scandalous than her divorce, further solidified her independence and provided her with a companion who shared some of her social interests. She continued to live a life of opulence, commissioning the construction of another grand mansion, Beacon Towers, in Sands Point, Long Island, a Gothic-inspired fantasy castle. However, as she aged, her interest began to shift beyond mere social climbing and lavish entertainments. The freedom and financial independence she had gained through her divorce, coupled with her innate sense of justice and her personal experiences with the limitations placed on women, propelled her into a new and unexpected role: a fierce advocate for women's suffrage. Alva became a prominent and influential figure in the American women's suffrage movement. She used her vast wealth, her extensive social connections, and her formidable organizational skills to champion the cause with the same strategic intensity she had applied to her social ascent. She hosted lavish suffrage rallies at her homes, transforming Marble House and Beacon Towers into centers for political activism, drawing in other wealthy women who might otherwise have been hesitant to join the movement. She funded suffrage organizations generously, providing crucial financial backing for their campaigns. She actively participated in parades and protests, often leading them herself, a striking image of a Gilded Age matriarch marching for women's rights. She founded the Political Equality Association in New York City in 1909, a suffrage organization dedicated to educating women about their political rights and advocating for the vote. She was instrumental in raising funds and public awareness, utilizing her celebrity to draw attention to the cause. Her transformation from a socialite obsessed with balls and mansions to a passionate political activist was remarkable, demonstrating her capacity for growth and her deep-seated belief in equality. She saw the fight for the vote as a natural extension of her own battle for autonomy and control over her life, recognizing that true freedom for women lay not just in personal wealth, but in political power and the ability to shape their own destinies. Her involvement lent an air of respectability and gravitas to the movement, attracting other wealthy and influential women to the cause and helping to legitimize it in the eyes of a skeptical public. She worked closely with prominent suffragists like Alice Paul, providing both financial and strategic support to the National Woman's Party. Alva Vanderbilt Belmont's $10 million divorce was not just a personal escape from an unhappy marriage that led her into new territories opening for a women of the post-Gilded Age era. It also became the inspiration for her own daughter's break from a loveless marriage, which you'll find all about in this next video.